What up, guys? So I am recording to you guys. I don't know when this is going to go out, but recording to you guys from the lovely city of Las Vegas. I'm down here for the Nogi Worlds competing. I go tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. But work continues, right? Progress and onward. Still have to do.
Right.
Still have to do work. It's funny. I was thinking about that. Like, this is like a random thing, right? A lot of times people think of discipline as very rigid. When you think about someone that's disciplined, we always think about someone that's very rigid, right? Like very structured and whatever it is. But to me,
regimented.
I think regimented, right? Yeah. But I think a lot of times discipline, honestly, like a big part of discipline is flexibility.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because, if you think about it, let's say if you're disciplined to make something happen, then if your schedule gets thrown off, then the disciplined thing to do is to find a way to make it happen. Opposed to, I can't do this, right?
Yeah.
And so I always bring all my gear with me to record videos or whatever, because that's what I do. As soon as I get out here, like I know my spots in Vegas. I know where I'm going to lift weights. I know the restaurants I eat at. I have it all lined out. You know what I mean? So this way, it's like I can stay on my plans while I'm there. Even like when I was here with Brandon, in both Brandon and Justin Cord a couple months ago, I was just getting into my bulking phase of weight. And so I had to get on the plan. I'm like, all right, this is what I got to do. And so I had to hit my weights up and do all that stuff. So just a random thought on staying disciplined. But anyway, guys, we're going to talk about some old man or old woman, old person jiu-jitsu tips today, and kind of ideas that I'm working on as I move closer to 40. So I'm about 3.5 months away from turning 40. And when I look at the way that I trained over the years, it's changed and adjusted. And so today we're going to get into some ideas on how I train now as I get older. Now, listen, as you listen to this, you may instantly sort of think, oh, maybe you're not that old, so you don't need to listen to this stuff. And that might be true. But a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is I think it's smarter training practices. And so if you implement some of this stuff when you're a little bit younger, it'll help out. It's like, a lot of the older guys that came before me, they ran their bodies into the ground. They started training more effectively, more intelligently, and they passed it down to us. And then so it's, my duty now. I trained, whatever else. And now, like, I learned a few things and now I'll pass it down to you guys. And so we'll get into some ideas on training as you get a little bit older. And hopefully this is useful to you. And I know we have a lot of masters competitors out there and masters jiu-jitsu people rolling with us here. And so we'll get into it. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping bring my bearded voice to your ears. Both of our bearded voices to your ears because we're both bearded. Eugene's got a nice beard. Did you have a beard when we first started doing the podcast, or was it kind of trimmed up?
I've had it.
Okay.
I don't know how big it's sometimes it's got really out.
I feel like your beard got longer when you lost the hair.
I don't know. I think it's shorter now. It's shorter right now. I kind of messed it up a little bit, but I like it shorter. I don't know. It's beards are funny. Like I've had my kids have seen me without a beard once, I think, since they've been born. My son's 9, so. I shaved. I was like, I was planning on cutting all my hair off, so I was like, I got to at least shave it one time just to say I did it, because I don't know if I'll ever shave the beard again since I don't have any hair on top of my head. So
that's right.
Yeah.
I hear you. So so both of us bearded fellas coming to you guys. It's completely off topic.
We have been off topic like this whole time.
I thought the first one was on topic. Discipline, right? And discipline's always a good subject to talk about, and making things happen.
I think you made a great point about discipline. Yeah.
I just think it's one of those. Well, a lot of people sort of get that regimented, structured, rigid, whatever, and they think and then if their schedule gets thrown off, and they oh man, I suck. It's like, dude, being disciplined means that you are flexible and you make it happen regardless of the circumstances.
For sure. Yep.
With that said, if you'd like to help your focus a little bit to help make those things happen, check out our sponsor, Grapple Science. So Grapple Science is a company, both of the guys are jiu-jitsu practitioners just like us, and they are, older fellas, I think 49, 50? Is that what it was?
Yeah, they're near 50. GW and John, both older guys, black belts, been at it for a while. So this is cool. Yeah.
And so they created a company. So they were kind of involved with the Killcliff company some years ago. And when they, were thinking about doing something with jiu-jitsu, they wanted to help something where, you can look around jiu-jitsu. A lot of people abuse stimulants, meaning like pre-workout stuff like that to get focused, because everybody's had long days at work. Everybody's got a lot of stuff going on. And so people are like, give me a boost of caffeine to give me some energy. And that does work to some degree, and there's some value to that. But when you start to overdo it, there's a lot of negative effects of caffeine.
Yeah.
A lot of times I find that people, if they actually can reduce their caffeine a little bit, their cardio actually does better. Maybe sort of, if you think about caffeine sort of and the stimulants, if you had a tachometer, in your car, when you start putting that idle starts to go up, imagine that that tachometer is just going up and up and up closer to the red line at idle, right? And then so as soon as you put the gas pedal on, you're already hitting the red. And so a lot of people, I've seen that happen where they go into the jiu-jitsu gym, they use a lot of pre-workout supplements, and their cardio is just absolute, trash. Then afterwards they start dialing back a little bit, and they feel a little bit better. Well, they wanted to produce a supplement that wasn't just based on stimulants, that would help people increase their ability to focus so that they could get more from their training. And, they found that a lot of people have just liked it for their just general like life settings, right? Like who wouldn't like to have a little bit more focus and a little bit more mental energy for your day-to-day life with work and kids and families and training and just everything else that is coming at you, right? So they came up with a supplement called Cognition. It's their flagship product. Again, it's a really good product. We've used it before. I like it. My wife's used it. I know Eugene's the same. And so again, if you guys want to check it out, go to grapplescience.com, and the promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. Again, this weekend, I will be rolling in my brand new Jiu-Jitsu gear made by Epic Roll. Nice. They make terrific stuff. And again, the new rash guards will be out, probably going on sale sometime in January, if you guys want to check those out. But again, if you guys want to go to their website and look around and see what they have, go to EpicRollBJJ.com. See the stuff that they have, the gear, the apparel, the rash guards, shorts, whatever it is that you're interested in. And if you find something you like, save 20% with the code Chewjitsu20. Also, thanks to our longtime sponsor, Charlotte's Web. So again, if you guys have never tried CBD, or if you've tried CBD but you've never tried Charlotte's Web, I encourage you to give their product a try. They go through a stringent third-party testing to make sure that what is in the bottle, what they say is in that bottle, is what's in there. And again, they produce a really pure product, so you know exactly what you're getting. And again, that's not always the case with a lot of the CBD products that are out there, because it is FDA unregulated, right? So there's some good and bad to the FDA. One of the things that's good about it is that if it's regulated, then you know what's in there. But anyway, I like the product. I think I get value with it with my sleep in general. And so I'm using their CBD products, and I've recently used a CBN product, which is called Stay Asleep. It's a gummy. I like it. My wife uses it, and we seem to get value from it. And again, as you get older, your sleep quality tends to go on the decline. So anything that you can help to kind of boost that up a little bit is a win in my book, especially when it comes to recovery, which again, talking about being older, recovery is really important. So check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu20 or Chewjitsu30, for 30% off the order. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up, we have a whole list of different perks that you get when you become a member of the Patreon. And again, it's for a very inexpensive price. If you want to take a look at the perks that you get, the library of content you get, and all that other stuff, check it out at patreon.com, the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And last but not least, guys, if you want to get my daily email and join up to the Chew Crew, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up, you'll get access to my Focus Jiu-Jitsu ebook. I just recorded a video for it, going through the ebook and getting into some more ideas about, adding focus to your rolling to improve faster, stuff that you can do during your open mats to get more from your training. Some stuff that I still do to this day, and I think can be very useful. If you want to check it out, go to my website, chewjitsu.net/join, to get it and get my daily email. All right, guys. So with that said, let's jump into this. So over the years, I have trained very differently. Back in my 20s, training basically would just be really hard all the time, right? And surprisingly, as I say this, knock on wood somewhere, right? I have been injured less from 29 to 39 than I was from 19 to 29. From 19 to 29, I had several knee surgeries. I had a broken nose surgery. I had a lot of injuries that took me out for periods of time. And so again, for me, as I'm getting older, I was lucky enough to observe the BJJ generations before me. I listened to them, took heart to the advice that they shared about this. And, something I just feel like saying this is something where I've heard all these people on the internet, they almost like talk about it like it's a badge of honor, where, the title of the video will be like, I've been training jiu-jitsu for X amount of years and I'm absolutely broken, but I've been training for 24 years in grappling and I'm not broken. I feel pretty damn good. And so, I'm happy about that. And again, I think a big reason of this is the way that I changed my training as I moved into my 30s. So let's get into some of these ideas and hopefully these are useful to you. So number one, these are in no specific order. These are just here for you. I train to stimulate, not annihilate. Stole that one from Lee Haney, an old bodybuilder. He talked about muscle building, he'd stimulate, don't annihilate, right? And I think it's a good idea, right? I'm there to build skill. I'm there to get in shape, stimulate my muscles, do all the different stuff I'm there to do. I'm not into the gym to destroy myself. I don't take pride anymore in simply just being obliterated after every training session. If I am obliterated, it's okay, but it's not like my main goal, right? It used to be back in the day, my whole thing for training was just destroy myself, go really hard. I just want to be in a pool of sweat afterwards. Now, like if I have to train hard, that's fine. But hard training does not mean effective training. And so I want to stimulate the growth of my game, not trying to annihilate myself.
Is there a good time to annihilate, do you think? Is there ever a good time? I mean, obviously when you're young, you can take a lot more of those really tough training sessions, but they do add up over time. I mean, beating your body down that badly will. And some people think like I have to like push myself to the limit to be prepared for a tournament or competition or MMA fight, whatever it is. Do you think there's a time to annihilate your body and be kind of a pool of sweat, just broken, just kind of like trying to catch your breath on the mats?
Well, you definitely need to know what your limits are, right? So again, it's very important at some point to like see where you're at. Even like now, like getting ready for this competition, like I've increased my training volume and there's been a couple sessions where I've reached my limit. And I'm like, oh, all right, I'm backing off. Now I know my limit because I know I've been around my body and I've been involved with training for such a long time. But I think at some point you definitely have to. Can you hear the ambulance?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Even out here in Vegas, they follow me.
In Vegas, baby, they got them everywhere.
But yeah, I think even when it comes to training, you have to touch it. You have to know where your boundaries are, where your limits are, and you have to feel that at some point, because again, otherwise you don't know. The key is that I'm not trying to get there every day. Periodically it's good to do because you have to touch that. You have to get your body ramped up into that mode, but you shouldn't be living there. That shouldn't be where you sit around all the time, because that's not going to be a good recipe for longevity.
No, I agree. I think sometimes you have to kind of know where that line is, so that way when you're reaching it or close to it, and also I think sometimes you can reach that line cumulatively. So like if you have like not necessarily one really tough session, but you maybe have a lot of sessions, and it kind of your body starts to kind of not respond the same. You feel like you're kind of broken down. Cumulatively, a lot of those sessions, maybe too much volume per se, could be something that annihilates you too.
Well, sure. I mean, like there's like, I know, like for instance, on certain days when I was getting ready for this competition, for instance, there would be like Mondays are an example. I would typically stop myself between 6 to 10 rounds over the day. I was typically on Mondays, I was typically drilling for 2 hours. I would drill for an hour before class and we'd roll, drill for another hour before class later in the evening and then roll. And I was drilling in that class. And so I was working too. And so with those 2 hours of drilling and mixed in, I only wanted to get about 6 to 10 rounds of 6 minutes over the course of that whole day, which I mean, 10 rounds is like a day plus the 2 hours of drilling. And we're not when I say drilling, I'm not doing like passive stuff. I'm talking about I'm drenched in sweat. I knew what my line was. And so a lot of times when I was like getting close to 6 rounds, I'm like, all right, like if I'm at 6 and I'm like cooked, I'm done. Right. And then also too, I knew that if I have that day on Mondays, like that kind of day, Tuesday has to be like a chill day. I might lift weights or something, but otherwise it's going to be mostly a recovery day. And then Wednesday I can push it hard again. So I know what my volume has to look like, opposed to when I was younger, I could do a little bit more volume. But if I was going back to when I was younger, I would still try to undulate that a bit, going up and
Sure.
down, like having a hard day followed by an easier day instead of hard, 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 hard. But again, sometimes the way that I found that out was basically running myself into the ground a couple times and like, all right, I got to back off a little bit because I was getting into situations where I'm really, really hard multiple days in the week. And then all of a sudden I'm getting mentally fatigued. I don't feel like I'm as strong as I am on the mat. My game's not as sharp. And so that's when I'm like, all right, I need to back off. And so sometimes if you guys are training a lot and you start feeling like you're regressing, a lot of times the best thing you can do is just have a damn recovery day and then come back afterwards, right?
Yep. All right.
So here's okay. So here's one for you guys. The next one is I train less but with more focus. So one of the things that I was talking to one of my students about once recently was that I have to be more dialed in because since my volume is less than it was when I was younger, I can't, if I'm going to get better, I can't afford to just step on the mat with just kind of I'm here. What's going on, guys? Going with the flow. When I'm training, even when I'm doing like my regular training where I'm just kind of messing around a bit, I have a clear focus as to what I'm trying to work on. And I do this because I don't want to step on the mat and not make improvement. Goes back to annihilating and, whatever. I could train really hard, go with the flow, do all that stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm doing good training or I'm having good training. It just means I'm there, I'm training. It could be good, but I'm going to get more from that training session with a clear focus. This is one of the reasons why I give away that Focus Jiu-Jitsu ebook that you guys get if you sign up to my email list, because it's strategies that are listed in the book that I implement in my game for like weeks at a time. And it's stuff like that helps me maintain my skill, even though I'm not training as much as I used to. And so one of the best things that you can do to get more from your training to improve faster in jiu-jitsu, even if you can't train every single day of the week, like, a 20-year-old can, is to make sure that you have a clear focus for an extended amount of time. So you have a clear focus on a technique, position, whatever it is, for at least like 4 weeks or so.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's the same thing that you can look at going to the gym. Right? If you go to the gym, you just do random exercises, you're not really going to make any progress. So it's like today is leg day, today is push day, today's pull day, whatever it is. I know a certain sequence and I'm progressing on that, meaning let me see if I can do increased reps or increased weight. That's kind of the progression of these. And you're going to do these exercises or this kind of routine for maybe 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a couple months, whatever it is. And that's how you're going to get better at. That's another thing for like skilled lifts, right? Like some kind of Olympic lifts, for example, or other lifts that require, some type of timing and skill and
well, I mean, even for things like bodybuilding, right? Like bodybuilding, a lot of times, we don't look at it as like, say, like skilled lifting, but there is a certain amount of focus and skill that you actually have to develop to really get the most out of the lifts, because you can go to the gym and, like, for instance, you can just do a bicep curl. Sure. Anybody can do that. But like, let's say if we want to really get the most out of that muscle, we slow that repetition down a bit and we focus on, like, for instance, the way that I'm holding my wrist, right? Because if that can change, really change the way that you're engaging that muscle. And then you can focus on at the top, getting a real good squeeze and contraction as you're going back down. There's a lot of things to the exercises that are deceptive when it comes to bodybuilding, because they're not necessarily the most complex lifts in a lot of cases, but at the same time, the way that you execute them requires a certain amount of focus that many people don't bring to that lift or their lifts. And it's something where it's almost a skill to develop, to sit there and be able to, like, focus for, 12, 15 to 20 reps, whatever it is, and just be dialed in to where for every, 3 to 5 seconds you're doing this lift and you're just focused on that. I mean, you think about how ADD everyone is, right? Like, getting them to focus on anything for that long sometimes can be difficult. So it's a challenge for a lot of people. But so again, the squat or the clean and press and the snatch or whatever, those things are 100% way more technical. But even with like bodybuilding or traditional lifts, there's a lot to them that a lot of people don't know because it's never been coached or anything like that. And again, you doing those movements and staying very focused on them is how you get more out of them.
Yeah, I agree 100% with I went to work out with Eli at his gym months ago, and we were just going through a basic routine, and he's like, we're doing a bench over row. And then he, like, broke it down. I mean, like, engage here, position this way, go this way. And I'm like, It was a lot. And I've done bent over rows for years.
And it felt
Never
completely
like
different.
that. It felt different. It's like,
Yeah.
and it fatigued me in ways that like I hadn't felt fatigue. You know, it was
That's it.
just that's the same thing with skill development, right? Like you start maybe, you know, with jujitsu, like you're starting on a basic entry. Let's work this entry. Let's get into position. Let's work on that stuff. We're doing that guard pass, which I love, by the way. I've been kind of like, it's kind of clicked for me. And after you left, that's all I was doing. I was working it. So I was like, oh, it's clicking. Now I'm starting to break it down. So I'm very excited about working that into my game. So it's just like anything, but you said something really important. You said, all right, everybody's going to be looking at this guard pass this week. Next week, people are going to forget about it. So that's the time when you have to kind of dial it in and start to really work it into your game and see, because it's everybody expects it. So a lot of times it's not going to be effective initially. And plus you're not as good at it and everybody's kind of looking for it. So yeah, spending time and like 2-3 weeks down the line after everybody's kind of forgotten about a technique and you're still working it, that's when you know it's going to start to really make sense and have some effectiveness.
That's right. And also too, for me, when I think about focusing on things for extended periods of time, what I always find is that as I get the macro, the big picture in place, the more I do that, the more I come back and find the little details. Right. So it's like, I can't possibly break down the little fine details if the big picture isn't in place, right? If the gross motor pattern isn't put in place. It's only after that I can really start to slow down. And that's really what's going on if you think about it, right? Like when you become really good at like a technique or a position, essentially is what's going on is you're slowing things down. You're able to like for instance, like thinking about someone who's doing any particular sport or whatever, a lot of times they will sort of like, for instance, let's take a quarterback, right? He doesn't have like a quarterback when he gets a hold of the football, he doesn't have very long to throw that damn ball, right? Talk about like just a couple seconds. But when he's in that pocket, it's a much longer 2 seconds than it would be to us, right? He actually has a little bit of time. Like, you know, if that quarterback would have, let's say 4 seconds or something, it's like, oh man, like this is like an eternity in that setting. Whereas, you know, if you talk to one of us, I mean, that 4 seconds would be a blip and we'd be getting crushed by some linebacker or something. And so it's the same thing happens with jiu-jitsu techniques is the more you do them, the more it kind of slows down and you make these small detailed adjustments like as you're doing things. And again, you cannot possibly do that right out of the gate. You can't possibly digest all the details right out of the gate. It only comes after you've done it for a while, you have some experience, you have some muscle memory developed, and then you start to then break it down further and further and further. And so that's why you have to do this stuff for an extended period of time. If you drill a technique a little bit and then you use it during a rolling, you don't really know much about it. It's only after you do this thing for like weeks and months that you really start to get a good grasp of it, or at least to start to.
Yeah, I think a couple things happen, you know, when you're learning something like in that capacity, when you're learning a skill or a technique, you number one, recognize patterns. You know, you see patterns a lot quicker. And then you also are able to account for variables when somebody doesn't give you a specific look. You can see and read and understand that you're seeing something before it even develops or it's about to develop. You kind of anticipate certain things. It's like a quarterback, like you said, they already know the routes that their receivers are going to run. They already know the plays. They already know where everybody's going to be in space. So they don't have to like look around. They almost know I'm throwing it this way. It's going to get right there. I should have somebody there at that time.
And they can also read the defense, right? Because if the defense comes at them, they're going to be like, oh, linebackers coming through. Oh, or defensive ends coming through. They're going to have like a kind of in their mind, I have a plan because they've been there before. Oh, like I've got to make a run for it, or I've got to like throw out of the way, whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah. And they call that, one of the best in my nerddom when I used to watch football, Peyton Manning was really good. He was fun to watch like later on in his career because he would go up to the line, he'd start calling audibles. He'd look at the defense and he would just say, all right, we're going to switch the play up right away and make it. And he would just do it all the time. It was incredible to watch, just someone that knows and understands just the game and understands positions and techniques and movements and stuff. And you have that with the elite jiu-jitsu practitioners. They understand movements and patterns and reactions. They see those patterns so quickly, and they're almost like they're making you move essentially without moving you. And it's cool to see.
Right. And so adding that focus to your game allows you to do that, because if you're not focused, you're not going to be able to develop that pattern recognition from that area. You will not master pattern recognition from every position. So your job is not to learn everything. Your job is to develop a very a couple of areas that you're very, very, very good from. And that's where, you know, you pull people in, you notice all the patterns, you got the whole map of this territory laid out in front of you, and the other person doesn't. Number 3 is that as I get older, and this has kind of been an ongoing thing, in my 20s, I would kind of just do whatever I wanted to do, right? I'd train really hard, get bad sleep. I would, you know, eat terrible food, whatever, but I could still train. As I get older, I treat everything in my life off the mat as an extension to my training on the mats, right? So it all counts, right? Think of it this way. Think of it as an equation, right? You're adding up your training, you're adding up your lifting, you're adding up your cardio, all these different things to get the highest potential outcome for yourself. But if your diet sucks, you're not disciplined with your sleep, you're boozing up every night, you're basically subtracting or even maybe dividing from that equation, right? So again, the more things that you can do to stack the deck in your favor and to add to that equation, the better results you'll have. So again, if you think about it, train really hard and then you go home and you get good sleep, or you eat a good meal and you have a nutritious meal, and you try to keep the alcohol to a minimum. You're not drinking every night, and you do a number of different things. You're just going to be better, right? I think this is one of the hidden benefits of jiu-jitsu, really, because a lot of times people don't have a repercussion for their lifestyle, right? So if you eat really bad food all the time and you don't do anything physical, you probably don't even realize how bad you feel. And then all of a sudden you go to the gym and you start training, like, God, I feel terrible. So you start drinking more water. You stop eating so much fast food. You start eating whole food and making your meals. And you're like, I feel pretty good. And then you get your sleep into check. And you're like, man, I feel pretty good. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, let's cut out the booze. And then you're not drinking every night. You save it for the weekends or something. Whatever it is that you're doing, all of a sudden you have this cascading effect, because when you go to the gym, you notice that you get these benefits from taking care of yourself off the mat. And so it's helpful. And so as I get older, though, this stuff is like it's a must, right? And I know that there's so many a little bit older that have not embraced this, right? They're not embracing that idea of like, look, everything that you do off the mat, it counts. As one of my buddies, Eli, coach, nutrition coach, would say, you're doing it in spite of it, not because of it, right? If you do really, really well and you're eating crap food, well, you're not doing it. I mean, because of the crap food, you're doing it in spite of it. Imagine what would happen if you had a really good diet and you got down to a really like good weight for your body frame. Like, how could that be a bad thing for you, right? If you were getting good sleep, good disciplined sleep, how could that possibly hurt you? Right. So just think about that. This is something that's really, really important. And a lot of times it gets overlooked because we like techniques, we like training, we like, all this stuff. And the boring stuff, the stuff like eating good food every day and going to sleep at the same time, that kind of stuff, it gets overlooked. It's boring. It's not fun, but it's very important.
Yeah. You don't realize you need it until you get older, and all of a sudden the output or the horsepower goes down a little bit, and like your red line is not as high as it was. You can't push the pace as long. So, okay, what can I do? What can I do to make myself more effective without just all athleticism? Well, you train in different ways, you supplement in different ways. And then the hardest part, I think, for younger people is they don't have to do it. But then you wish you did, because you could have gotten so much more out of your body when it runs so well on shit fuel, right? And then imagine if you put good fuel in it, good rest, good recovery, good maintenance, all that stuff. And that's the thing. It's an extension. Like when I see people for rehab and stuff like that, I'm like, look, you're not take the physical therapy, the training we're doing outside of jiu-jitsu as a supplement towards your jiu-jitsu. This is part of your jiu-jitsu. Like the better you get your hip mobility, the better you're going to be able to get into these techniques. Not only are you going to get hopefully injured less, protect your knees, protect your back, but you're going to be able to get into certain techniques more safely. And so this is just it's a part, I think like it's a part of the training. It all comes out of it. Like it's not just what I do in the gym. It's what you do outside of the gym. And that's so important. And it's so hard to get that point across until you're.
Well, and then a lot of people make excuses to it, right? So like older people, they know, right? They know they should be eating better. They know they shouldn't be drinking or whatever it is. Like they know but then there's always an excuse. And sometimes those excuses are legitimate, I mean, sometimes it's like, yeah, you might be having some stuff with your kid. It's screwing up your sleep. There's definitely temporary periods of time. But like for long periods of time, there's just no excuse for it. And again, I'm not saying that, like, I'm not saying this to be an asshole, right? Let's just phrase it like that. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm so much better than you, because I have my own problems, right? We all have our own problems. We're constantly in practice. But my thing is, like, there's no reason to eat terrible food all the time. There's no reason to constantly abuse your body into like rough ways and not improve it, right? There's no reason for it. And as we get older, it's just one of those things where if you're an older grappler, it's in your best interest to, again, become disciplined with your lifestyle outside of the gym. If you're interested in being able to do this for the long haul, if you're not, then whatever, run your body ragged, just let it fall apart and destroy it with whatever you want. That's fine. But you would feel a great difference in your body as far as the inflammation going on, your rate of recovery, your overall, like your ability to focus and your sharpness mentally, if you were to do some of the things we just talked about. Which kind of goes to the next thing. As I get older, I've become far more disciplined with my lifting. Now, granted, I'm not lifting heavy, right? So I'm not going like, I mean, heavy's relative, but I'm not lifting like heavy for me. It's moderate weight done with like a lot of controlled repetitions. But the thing is that type of lifting has become like glue for my body. I feel like, you know, I've talked this story a few times on the podcast and on the YouTube channel. When we first became parents, my wife and I, there was a period where I didn't lift for a couple months, and I was starting to get, but I was still training jiu-jitsu, right? Because that's my job. I got to teach and train. So I'm getting into the gym and training, and all of a sudden I'm running into tendonitis. My knees are hurting. Like, I just don't feel very good. And so I told Jess, like, baby, I got to start lifting again. Go back to the gym within a couple of weeks. It's all gone. I feel good again. Knees feel good. They feel limber. My elbows are good again. It's like, oh, wow. Just from lifting weights, right? Not stretching or anything else. Just lifting some weights, pumping some iron. Just in a good controlled fashion. I also have a lot of older friends who can range from in their 50s and some in their 60s, getting close to or at 60. And a lot of the guys that I know who have trained for a long time, one of the things that is kind of a common thread is that they all lift. Now, some of them have different types of lifting, you know. First off, well, none of them lift heavy, like super, super heavy, but they all lift a little differently. Some do bodybuilding, some do kettlebells, whatever, but they all lift. And so if you're getting into jiu-jitsu, you're a little bit older, or you're older and then, you know, you're starting to feel, you know, your body's starting to take those bumps and bruises a little bit more than you'd like, I would encourage you to mix in lifting. Even if that means that you have to, like, let's say if you said, okay, I train jiu-jitsu 4 days a week, and I'm going to take a day off jiu-jitsu, train jiu-jitsu 3 days a week, and I'm going to lift like 2 or 3 days a week. I think it would be in your best interest to do it that way, opposed to training 4 days a week and then do almost no lifting. For the reason being that what happens when you get injured, right? You can't train. And so would it be better to train jiu-jitsu a bunch and then get injured? Or would it be better to train jiu-jitsu at a good pace, but be able to do it just long-term consistently without very many injuries that take you off the mats, right? One of them is going to lead to more success than the other long-term, because you can do it without getting injured. So again, I encourage you guys, if you're not already doing so, get in the weight room, get into the gym, start doing some strength training or some lifting.
And lift the right way. Lift with form as your number one thing first. Lift full range of motion, really, you know, work your joints in their full range and their full capacity, and strengthen, because people like to go to the gym and lift a lot of weight, but they do mid-range stuff where their muscles are the strongest. That length tension relationship of the muscle can lift the most weight. Where injuries occur usually at end ranges, not always, but where your arm all the way extended. So make sure you train, you know, full range of motion, full bending, full straightening. For example, if you're doing a bicep curl or tricep extension, whatever it is, strengthen in the full range and work on that technique. That's so important. And then you can start build the weight up. Don't, if you're like compensating, you can hurt yourself. You can make lifting be detrimental. So Eli is a great person, a great resource. We talk about him all the time for your diet, for your strength training, for your guidance on that stuff. If you don't know what you're doing, a lot of people have plenty of experience. I think I have a ton of experience lifting and exercising, but there's also so much that I don't know. And having a coach and a resource like that is incredibly useful, because you have them for jiu-jitsu, you have them for everything. And I think for lifting and having a program and having a weight, like, how do you lift for your body? How to supplement for jiu-jitsu to keep your body, you know, together. I think that's also important to have.
Yeah. Number 6 is I had to let go of who I used to be. So this is a tough one for a lot of us that have been training for a long time, or if you get into jiu-jitsu and you maybe had an athletic background previously. there's this weird disconnect where mentally we don't really feel all that much different over the years, right? Like we kind of always, you obviously know that maybe you're a little bit smarter, you picked up a few things, whatever, but you still feel at some core level you're the same person you've always been, right? But with your body, that's not the case, right? Like, because mentally, for instance, you might be getting older and be like, man, I'm getting better with age. And then you get on the mats or you train or you lift weights or whatever, and your body tells you, ooh, not what I used to be. This is taking a lot more out of me than it used to be, or than it used to. And so that's one of the things that as we get older, you're going to go through what would be considered kind of a little mini ego death, right? Like, because again, ego meaning like your self-construction, who you think you are, right? That's what that is. The stories you tell yourself, right? So at some point, my story was that I could train every single day, 5, 6, 7 days a week, no problem. I could train all day long. I used to do that, and I could maintain that kind of volume. I used to train all the time. Well, as I got older, I had to change that story because that's not who I was anymore. I couldn't train like I used to do back in the day. And so I had to dial it back, right? That's hard because there's resistance, because a lot of time, there's resistance, especially if you like who you were, right? Which I liked who I was. I liked being young and being able to train 3-4 hours a day, no problem, and do that for 7 days a week sometimes. As I got older, I had to back off a little bit. And I think that sometimes can be difficult. And then if you're getting into jiu-jitsu and you have a previous athletic background, maybe you were good at something. You were good at this sport or whatever, and all of a sudden you get into jiu-jitsu and you're trying to go hard like you did in that sport when you were 20, and now you're 45. You're gonna have to dial it back a little bit, because that person that you used to be when you're 20, they're gone. They no longer exist. You are a completely different person. Like, we in the brain, we know this, but it's until we feel it physically that we have some experience with it. And so sometimes people struggle with that, but you got to let go of your old self if you are an older person in jiu-jitsu, whether you had an athletic background or if you're struggling with that kind of thing.
How do you know when to do that? What was the turning point for you when you're like, I gotta let go of this, go through this ego death? Like, was there signs? Was it the injuries that kind of, was it goals even? Like, think about, I tell people all the time, like when I was talking to some of the white and blue belts, I'm like, what are your goals for training, right? Like, do you want to be, like, maybe you come in with these aspirations of, I want to be a world champion, but maybe now you're 35 or you're 38. Are you going to be a world champion? Maybe not. What are your goals for jiu-jitsu or for life or for what you're doing? I think sometimes that can help you, but I'm curious to hear what was the point for you when you went through that mini ego death.
We're constantly going through it. It's not once. It's like you constantly hit stages, right? Like, there's periods where, in my early 30s, I was like, oh man, I can't do this anymore. Like, oh, wow, okay, like I've got to change things up, because I feel like I'm running into issues with my body or with my ability to do things. There were also periods where I was rolling with like younger guys where, at some point I was the young up and comer, and now I'm rolling with these young guys and I'm trying to hang with them, and I realize I physically can't. And again, that can be frustrating when you used to be the guy that can hang and go with anybody, right? So again, you go through these periods and you'll know when something's up, because you're trying to hang on to it, and you'll know when there's an issue, because you're like, you'll start thinking about, why I used to do this. I used to be able to do that. Yeah, you used to. Different now, right? And so if you start having that kind of dialogue in your head, that's usually kind of when you know this is going on, when you're starting to used to stuff, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you push on that gas pedal and you just don't get that same acceleration or as much of it. There's less of that burst.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like a kind of a purple belt, like we would just have the Thursday classes. We'd do a lot of rounds, and I would just be so exhausted, and I felt great. And now I'm like, if I get that exhausted, I feel like I can't move the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta be careful.
Yeah, but it was, man, I think it's important to do that stuff, and I just think you can counteract some of that stuff by not going as hard, but obviously using technique more, and you have more technique as you maybe going against a 25-year-old, but you're almost 40 and you're a black belt. Maybe they're a blue or purple, and they have the horsepower that you used to have, but they don't have the skill set. So you have to, that's the whole thing about your old man game, right? We're kind of working on some of those things, just grinding and slowing, kind of making people go at your pace. I think that's you notice that, like the horsepower and all the energy, almost like for me. And like sometimes I used to have a full day of work and go train, and I was like, man, I felt upbeat and plenty of energy. Now I'm like, man, just get into the gym. I'm like, it takes a little while to get moving, so to warm up the body. But and it's weird how it happens at different stages, like at different ages to people. Like I think people think 40s like, you know, the slowdown, like all of a sudden. But for some people, it happens earlier. Some people happens later. Sometimes people get better at 40. You know, if they start like looking at their diets and doing other things outside of it, and maybe doing conditioning outside of jiu-jitsu, training a little smarter. So again, just realize you're getting older, of course, but yeah, you're definitely not that person. At least you're not going to go crazy wild like you were in your 20s and go super hard or anything like that.
That's it. And this kind of goes to the idea that you kind of mentioned a second ago, is that number 7 is that I choose techniques and positions very carefully. So for instance, if I'm rolling an athletic person, you know, I'm not going to use a game that's heavy on movement versus them. I'm not going to try to keep pace with movement with the person that is more than me, right? Like if I'm going with like a young athletic dude, like say Brandon Reed or something like that, there's been times where I've rolled with him and literally would let him pass to like side control real quick, just so I can get a grip on him and like attach him. Because if he starts getting into his like misdirection game and he's moving all over the place, really tough for me to deal with. I also don't do things like invert as an example, because the juice ain't worth the squeeze, right? Because again, I mean, that's like a really rough position on your neck and back. And I know some people will say, well, you know, so-and-so says inverting's fine and this and that. I'm like, well, talk to me in 20 years. Talk to me when you're in your 40s. Let me know how you feel. I've never met anybody that's inverted as a mainstay of their game that doesn't have some back and neck issues. So again, for me, that's not something I want to mess around with too much. You know, different movements put different wear and tear on your body differently. And so that's one that I want to stay away with. Right. But kind of going to this idea of like different positions and techniques, like, you know, I'm even having to adapt my game a little bit these days to becoming a little bit older. So for instance, I'm doing a little bit more upper body work with takedowns instead of just shooting all the time, learning some stuff there, getting proficient with it. And then, you know, when it goes to the ground, a lot of my guard passing has been what I call my sort of old man slow guard passing, where, you know, especially at seminars and things like that, where I'm trying to roll with everybody, you know, a bunch of new bodies, a bunch of people that I'm rolling with. I can do that kind of game where I'm not moving a whole lot, but I'm still basically being able to outposition someone. And so learning these styles of jiu-jitsu and being able to use them effectively has been very useful as I'm getting older. Just as a side note and shameless plug, the old man passing, which I have a name for. It's a different name than that, but that's like that was my project name for it. When it releases, you guys can hear the actual name, but that will be released sometime probably in February or March if you guys are interested in learning how to do that stuff. But again, you got to choose your techniques and positions carefully, and it only becomes more and more important as you get older.
Yeah, you go to your pace, and you go at your you know, what's comfortable to you. You try to pull people into your game, like you said. And as you get better, you kind of create that slow game, if that's what works for you, and you work on that kind of cooking. We talk about that all the time, cooking your opponent, kind of making them almost like you got that energy bar, and you make their energy bar kind of go down a lot faster than yours does. And then eventually those bars get close, or even they get lower on energy than you do. And then you can kind of push the pace if you need to. But it's been helpful feeling you do that. Like when we roll, feeling you do that old man game. And then I'm like, okay, all right, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the effectiveness. And,
and
I'm starting.
You're like, all right, let me try this out myself.
I started implementing it. So I've been asking more questions and just passing a little bit differently, working on new ways to pass. Because sometimes I'll be a little lazy and I'll just play off my back and I'll just defend and stuff. And that makes you tired to defend. Like when you're constantly defending people's attacks. Yeah, it can. So you rather be the one attacking at your pace and not trying to fend off guard passes for somebody else's.
All right, guys. And so the last one that I'll share with you guys, and again, this isn't really, I'm not going to share anything that's groundbreaking, but maybe I'll give you permission to do this, but it's just take a damn day off, right? Take some days off. They're very useful. You know, this is something that me and one of the boxing coaches were talking about the other day that is so tough to drill through people's heads, especially like the younger fighters and people that are a little bit less experienced. They just feel like they're going to like lose all their progress instantly if they just take a day off, right? They're somehow going to fall behind or whatever. But, a lot of cases, and you can express it in different ways, but to improve, right, your rate of progress is only going to be limited by your ability to recover, right? So you can only get as good as your ability to recover. If you can't recover, you're not going to improve as fast as you would like. And so again, taking those days off for rest, it really helps. Like getting ready for the competition this week. I'm competing Friday. I rolled decently hard on Monday. Tuesday I drilled. Wednesday I drilled. Thursday, today, I'm not doing anything. I'm just like, I went to the tournament, kind of looked around, sort of get a lay of the land, so to speak, so I know where I'm going to be tomorrow. Then I'm just hanging out. That's it. Just relax and let my body rest. And so like I've had almost almost 3 days of like no rolling. Right. Mm-hmm. So that means that on Friday, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to have a full tank. I'm going to be full of energy, ready to go. And again, this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And even in your day-to-day training, if you start running into a wall where you're just like, God, I'm lethargic, I feel like blah, blah, whatever, take a day off. It's fine. You'll feel better when you come back from the day off than you would have otherwise. And I have so many people in training that just cannot wrap their head around the idea of that taking days off is important, or that it's as important as it is. And so, again, maybe you're run down, your body's feeling real like janky and ragged and everything else. You listen to the podcast, hear me telling you it's okay. Take a day off. It's fine. Your progress isn't going to go anywhere. It didn't build up overnight. It's not going to go anywhere overnight. And you'll feel better from the rest and come back stronger.
Yeah. Recharge the batteries a little bit, and build some of that hunger too. You haven't trained in in the way that you usually train for like 3 days. You're going to be ready to go. You're like, man, I'm hungry. I'm ready to compete. I feel good. You're rested. I just think, people get so bent out of shape. Like if I'm not in there every day, I'm going to get worse. You might even get better. You'd be surprised by taking a little time off. You get to almost like you get an outside perspective a little bit. You can kind of be outside of this thing that you're doing all the time. And I think it just gives you, like I said, gives you perspective and gives you a little bit of
get a little distance.
A little distance is always good, right? I mean, I think it's always beneficial to have a little bit of space.
It helps.
It's like, you and your wife, or me and my wife, for example, if we're like, we're around each other all the time, maybe she goes to do a training or something, and then when I see her again, it's like, man, I've missed her so much. It's like you get this renewed kind of energy and affection towards each other. So I think it's like the same thing with jiu-jitsu. You take a few days off and it's like, man, I've missed this. I'm so excited to be back. And I think you're not gonna take it for granted. You'll be more focused, and I think it'll play dividends, and plus it helps your body out a little bit too.
100%. Yeah. The what is it? Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah.
Right. So like
for everything,
little bit of distance, man, it's really important, and then even if you're trying to assess your game and figure out a direction you want to go with, it's kind of the old adage that, if you're too close to the tree, you can't see the forest. Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes you got to take a step back so you can see what the hell's going on. And, that's even, I've implemented that with my life in other areas where sometimes I just take a week off to get away from things and just everything, just so I can kind of look at where things are going and like, how do I want things to go forward,
Sure.
And so it's important. So I think with that one, guys, we'll stop there.
That's right.
There's more. And if you guys are on my email list, you got more of these. I sent you a bunch, but we'll stop there. And again, none of these are groundbreaking, never heard before ideas. But, the older I get, the more fundamental, the more basic the idea, typically, the more that I find that it's actually useful and works. And so, again, if you take any one of these ideas, you can get a lot of bang for your buck with it. Guys, thank you for being here this week. Big thanks to our sponsors. Has happened, Grapple Science. If you guys haven't checked them out, they have a new supplement called Cognition that is there to help you get more focus and get more from your training without blasting you full of stimulants that have all kinds of negative side effects, right? So it's a great supplement. I'm a fan of it. I think it's worth a try. Again, everybody responds to things differently. So again, take that for what you want, but give it a try, see what you notice and see if you enjoy the supplement. And if you want to save 20% with it, use the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. Again, it's a product made by Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, Jiu-Jitsu black belts for Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. If you guys want to get some new jiu-jitsu gear, apparel, rash guard, shorts, whatever it is, check them out at epicrollbjj.com. I personally get all my rash guards and shorts made through him. I think he does a great job, Matt and his crew there. And if you guys want to check them out and get any of their gear for 20% off, use the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order at epicrollbjj.com. And guys, if you haven't checked out Charlotte's Web before, I encourage you to give it a try, especially kind of as we were talking about getting older today and, you know, the importance of recovery and rest and all those things. One of the supplements that I do like from them is the CBN Stay Asleep product that they have, which, again, CBN is a little different than CBD, but it seems to have a more beneficial effect for sleep cycles and the quality of sleep. And so I feel like I've noticed a difference. I like it. My wife likes it, so we use it. But again, if you guys have never tried it, or if you'd like to try it and see if it helps, try it for 30 days. See what you get from it. You know, the worst case scenario is it doesn't really give you much and whatever, move on. Best case scenario is you get better sleep and you get better recovery and you train better and all those things, all the good stuff that comes from sleep. And so if you guys want to check it out, go to their website at charlottesweb.com. You can save 30% on the order by using the promo code Chewjitsu30 for 30% off. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly and get access to our exclusive library of content we have and get all kinds of extra perks, check us out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. For a very inexpensive price, you get access to the library that we have, the content back end that we have for the podcast that has a bunch of stuff in it, but you also get a bunch of other perks. If you want to check those perks out, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, last but not least, if you want to join my daily email, where a lot of the stuff that we talk about here comes from, and also get a focused jiu-jitsu ebook, which goes into ideas to add more focus. We talked about it earlier, to your training, to get more from your training so you can improve faster and get better at jiu-jitsu. Then go to my website at jujitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up, you'll get my daily email, and then you'll also get access to the free ebook. And then from there, you can enjoy it and use the tips that I give in there to help you improve. And so, guys, with that said, that's the podcast for today. Hopefully, you guys got something from it. And for all of you guys who have been coming up to me this last day or two here in Vegas, telling me you listen to the podcast, you enjoy it, I appreciate you, and thank you for coming up and saying, hey, it's fun to meet the people on the other end of this thing, because obviously, whether it's a video, whether it's podcasting or whatever, we put the stuff out and it's like one-way communication, and it's fun meeting the people on the other end to see you and to like hear how it's helped you or whatever. So appreciate you guys for taking a second to let me know. I do appreciate it, because it lets me know that it's actually having an impact on someone, because I actually get to see people's like the real faces and not just a username somewhere or whatever. Appreciate you guys.